Hey everyone, how's it going? I wanted to give a kind of a walkthrough of how you can build a real-time chat room using Vue and also the Agora API. So this is what we're going to build out. We have two panels here. And if I go onto the left panel and type in a message like "what is up," this message will be sent to a server and then broadcasted to anyone else who happens to be in this chat room. Right? So I could open up new tabs and kind of keep on sending messages. And you'll see that those messages basically go back and forth between these. All right, so that's what we're going to build out. If you're interested in learning how to do that, stick around and let's just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be using Vite to kind of spin up my Vue application. So let me just go ahead and do npm create, and I will say Vite, and then I'll just go ahead and do this current directory, and that'll give you a prompt of what type of application you want to create. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this Agora RTM Vue, and I will select the Vue package with JavaScript. So after you've done that, you can run an npm install, and that will install all the dependencies for this project. There are two additional dependencies we want to install, and those include the Agora RTM SDK, and then additionally we need a UUID package. So let's install those along with the other default packages that come with the Vite setup, and then I'll say npm run dev to basically spin up our Vue application at port 3000. So let's just verify that this shows some type of Vue application, which we have it here. You can go ahead and make sure the counter works. And we are going to try to build out this chat room. So before we dive into actually building out the application, I do want to show you that you do need to have an Agora login. So go ahead and go to agora.io, create an account, and you can create a project. If you click on the project management, click create, and make sure that you create a testing mode project. You can name it whatever you want and give whatever use case that you want. But once you've created that, you can go and you can copy this app ID, which is what we're going to need. So copy the app ID, and that is about all the setup that you'll need to do in terms of the Agora IO dashboard page. Let's go back to our application, and using that, let's go to source and app.vue. This is like the main Vue component that displays that counter. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just delete some of the stuff that we don't need. So this template we can go ahead and get rid of, and this auto import we can get rid of. So do know that we are using the Vue 3 composition API, and you have to have this setup keyword on your script tag, and then that allows you to use a couple of custom Vue functions to basically set up state and also listen to when the component is mounted and whatnot. So inside of this script tag, let's go ahead and first import the Agora API. So I'll do import from Agora RTM SDK. And then what we also want to do is we're going to bring in a package called UUID. Remember, we install that with our npm dependencies at the beginning. And this allows us to generate just random IDs that we're going to be using. Make sure I put as there. And there's a couple of things we need to bring in from Vue itself. So I'm going to bring in the ref. I'm going to bring in on mounted. And I'm also going to bring in next tick. And that's all from the Vue package. So once you have all those basically imported, we need to set up a couple of things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up an app ID. And remember, this is a thing that we copied over from the Agora IO dashboard. So let's go ahead and copy that over. And we also need another constant for the name of our web chat room channel, right? So you can put whatever you want here. I'm going to put WDJ, but this is basically a unique key that different users know how to connect to a certain channel and share messages on. So the first thing we want to try to do is when this app loads, we want to basically connect to the Agora RTM chat room. So let's just go ahead and make a client. So I'm going to say const client is equal to Agora RTM create instance, and I'll pass it the app ID. And then we also need to basically set up a local variable here called channel, which we can use to keep track of the channel once we create it. So in Vue, when this component mounts onto your page, there's some code we want to actually invoke to set all this stuff up. And so we can go ahead and call that onMounted function that we imported here. I'm going to say unmounted. I'm going to pass it an async function, and let's just go ahead and pass it a callback. So when this component mounts, the first thing we want to do is we want to log in to our client. So we'll say client login, and we need to pass it two arguments. I'm going to pass it UUID, which we'll have to generate a UUID And then I'm going to also pass a token of null. Since we're using like the test API, you pass token null, but if you're using a production API, you'd actually have to set up like a token server, and this would be a token that's generated by the UID that you generate on your client. So we haven't created a UID here, so let's go back up here to our constants. I'm going to say const UID is equal to UUID v4. If you call this method, you get like a UID or UUID, that's like a unique identifier. It's just a string with a bunch of characters and hyphens. But now that we've connected to the client, what we can do is we can create a channel off of that. So I'm going to say channel is equal to await client.create channel. And I'm going to pass in that hard-coded channel name that we have up here as a constant. All right, so this channel has a bunch of methods that you can use to kind of join, listen to messages, and send messages. So the first thing we want to do is we want to tell this UI that join the actual channel. So let's just go ahead and say await channel.join, and that should connect to the actual channel. And that's all we're going to do for the onMounted for right now. We'll come back in a little bit and add some more functionality. But hopefully, if you go back to the UI, when this thing refreshes, you should see some logs down here that says member joined, WDJ. So you know this thing's working correctly if you start seeing some messages like this, and you know that you've joined the right channel. And this is kind of our UUID v4 that we generated. Remember, it's just a bunch of characters with hyphens in between it. But that just kind of identifies us and our messages so that other people can know they came from us versus someone else. All right, so the next step is we need to start building out some type of panel so that we can actually send some messages. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my template section of my view, single page view, and I'm going to go ahead and start making some divs. So I'm going to make one called panel, and inside of that, I'm going to make another one called messages. And inside of messages, I'm going to make one called inner, which is going to be needed for just basically adding some CSS padding and stuff. So the first thing I want to do is underneath the inner, I'm going to add a form, right? So I'm going to say form, and what that form is going to do is basically listen for when a user types into an input box. So we probably need to add an input, and we also need to add a button. So I'll just go ahead and add those two things with a plus sign. I'll do a button here. And when someone types into this input box, we want to keep track of what they're typing in, right? So let's go ahead and declare a reference up here. So if you're using the Vue3 composition API, you can kind of create state with a ref. So I'm going to go ahead down here and say const text is equal to ref, and I'm going to pass it an initial value of an empty string. And what this allows us to do is we can actually bind this. So I'm going to say vModel is equal to that ref of text. And now when someone types into this input box, which hopefully if I save this, we can see it show up on the page now. When someone types into this input box, that's going to update some state on the Vue component inside of this variable here. And let me just kind of show you that. I'm going to go ahead and render out text here and kind of show you that as I type in, like you can see it printing out. So what I need to do is when this form gets submitted, I want to take that text that the user typed and I want to send it over to this channel that we created. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to do next. So on the form itself, on Vue, there's a way to listen for when the form is submitted. I'm going to say @submit, and I'm going to say .prevent to prevent the page from refreshing. And then I'm going to call a method called sendMessage. Now we haven't created this method yet. So let's just go ahead and go up here. I'm going to say function sendMessage, and I'm going to go ahead and basically call this like this. So channel.sendMessage is actually going to send a message to the Agora server, and that's going to broadcast it to everyone else who's in this channel. There's another argument you can put in called text, like so. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I think there's other types of messages that you can send, but we just want to send text messages to other users here. And let me point out that in order to get the value of the text ref, you have to do text.value. Okay, that's just how you do it in Vue3 with the composition API. And after we sent that message, we want to set the text back to the empty string. So let's just go ahead and save this and verify if we go back and we type in some stuff and click plus, that the input box gets cleared out, and it also prints out a console log from the Agora library saying that a message was sent from this UID. Okay, so everything seems like it should be good. There are some things I want to add in here. So basically, we don't want users to send blank messages. So I'm going to go ahead and put a check to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm going to say if text.value is equal to blank. I'm just going to go ahead and return. I don't want people sending blank messages, honestly. So the next step is, how do we actually listen and print out messages that come in, right? So as we type in messages, we need to kind of append them to an array so that we can display them in the template down here. So let's just go ahead and make another reference. I'm going to say const messages is equal to ref of an empty array like this. And when we actually send the message, what we're going to do is we want to push. I'm going to say messages.push, or sorry, messages.value.push. And I'm going to go ahead and push a couple of things. So we want to push the text, so like this. And then I also want to pass the UID of who sent the message. So we're going to use this later, but right now, if you sent the message yourself, we're just going to use our own UID. And let's verify this works. I'm going to go ahead and type something in and click plus, make sure the app doesn't crash. Seems like we're still good. But we want to actually render these messages out. So inside this inner div that we added, we can start rendering over all those messages. So I'm going to make another div here. I'm going to call it message. And then inside of this message, I'm going to do a v-for, which is how you can loop over an array in Vue. So I'm going to go ahead and say message, comma, index in messages. And now we have these variables that we can kind of use everywhere inside of our div here. So to kind of show you that, I think we also need to add a key. So after the v-for, I'm going to go ahead and say colon key is equal to index. Go ahead and save that. And inside the div, I just want to show you, if I go ahead and render out message.text, because remember, we pushed text here. This is messages, and we pushed in a object that has a text value and a UID. So let's go ahead and save this and make sure that this thing prints out. So I'll type in hello, click enter, and notice that these messages actually are getting broadcasted to the Agora server, and they're also getting kind of pushed into that messages array and displayed on the page. So the next step is we kind of want to put a prefix here that says you, if it's me who sent the message, or I need to put them, if it's them, someone else in the chat room who sent the message. We're keeping it basic. We're not putting timestamps or actual like usernames. So let's just add another div here. I'm going to say v-if message.uid is triple equals UID. And I'm going to give this a class of user self, so we can kind of style it later. User self. And go ahead and inside of that, I'm just going to go ahead and put that text like so. Actually, no, I'm just going to put u colon, and then I'm going to do mbsp for putting a space. And I'm going to do the same thing for the them. So instead of user self, I'm going to say user them. I'm going to change this to them. And then we can actually use another directive called v-else. So if this one's not true, it's going to take this one. And then finally, we need to display the text. I'm going to go ahead and say text, and then I'm going to put message.text. All right, let's try this again. Save the page. I'm going to go ahead and type in a message, and notice that it says you and then the actual text. We're going to reformat this in a bit to make it look a little bit nicer, but I just wanted to kind of show that that should all be working. All right, so kind of like the very final steps is we need to listen for when other people send messages on our chat room, right? So when we create the channel and after we join onto it, you can actually listen for events. So I can say channel.on, and I can say channel message like this. This is the event name you can use. And when someone sends a message, you're going to get a message and a peer ID. So let's go ahead and grab those from our arguments. And what we're going to do is we're going to push that into our array. So we're going to do a very similar approach here. Go ahead and push that into our array. And instead of UID here, I'm going to go ahead and say UID is colon peer ID. And then instead of text, I'm going to go ahead and put this. All right, so this should hopefully push the message into our thing, but notice that there's some like code duplication over here. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to refactor this a little bit. I'm gonna make a function called a pinned message, which is going to be an async function. And we're gonna kind of take that code that we put here, and I'm gonna copy it up here. So go ahead and just push message. And instead of doing this whole thing, I'm going to go ahead and say append message. And then I'm going to paste in that object that we created. Okay, this is just a way to kind of clean up code. I mean, you could have copied and pasted this in multiple places if you wanted to, but this is just a cleaner way to do it. And we're going to actually have to do one more thing after we push the message, and I'll show what that is in a second. All right, so let's go ahead and push the messages in. Oh, it crashed. We do have an error. Message is not defined. Oh, I shouldn't have just copied and pasted this. I actually need to use this. I need to use text.value, and then I need to use UID here. So that was my bad. I copied the wrong code. Let's try it again. Let's go ahead and type in a message, click send, and we get the message sent. So let's, at this point, assuming we didn't do anything wrong, I can open up a new tab and have two different users sending messages. So I'm going to say what is up from this tab and go over here, and notice that it prints out them text what is up. So there's a little issue here. It shouldn't have been this. I'm probably pushing the wrong thing into the array. So let's go back and double check what I'm actually sending in. Oh, this actually needs to be message.text. Okay, so this is going to be an object that comes from Agora, and this is going to have a text property on it. So let's go back and make sure I can send that. And everything looks good. Everything still seems okay. And if I go back here, I can say like, what is up? Send that message, go back to this tab, and notice that it comes in. All right, so now let's try to style our application. I'll be honest, I'm going to copy and paste styling in because if I didn't, this tutorial will be very long. But basically, we want to add some default height to the body and make sure that there's no margin on the body. On the actual app itself, I want to add some gradient to the background to make it look a little cooler. So the next thing is I want to style the panel and the messages in the inner to kind of make a panel that's like, you know, rounded and larger. Let's just go ahead and paste in a panel class. The main thing that you need to focus on is display flex. We want basically all the things inside the panel to be laid out in a column. So I'm going to use display flex and flex direction column. The rest is just kind of self-explanatory. You have some padding, some margin, some background colors, you know. Let's go ahead and look at this panel. You see here the panel is showing up. There's also some like margin or padding on the page. Let's go back and find where that's happening. I think here on the app, there's some margin tops. Let's delete that. We don't really want that. And then what we can do, so now let's actually try to style the inner thing. So let's go ahead and go back. I'm going to paste in a messages styling like this to basically style the messages. This is going to put all the messages in a scrollable container. So when there's a ton of messages, you can actually scroll them. So let's just go ahead and like send a bunch of messages and notice that a scroll bar pops up. Okay, so we're going to use that to make sure that we don't have like stuff going off the page. And one thing I messed up, I think I put the input inside of the messages. I probably shouldn't do that. So let's go ahead and go up here. I'm going to go ahead and put the form outside of that div so that it doesn't actually scroll with the messages. All right, there we go. That looks a lot better. So now as I type in messages, you'll see that we can append messages. And then for the final styling, let's just go ahead and paste in the last amount of styling here. So for the message, I'm going to do display flex and text line left, which will basically make the you and them be aligned properly. It makes it look better. And then if we go over, we have two classes for user them and user self, just to make it green and red, kind of self-explanatory. And then on the form itself, we're just adding some width and some styling and padding to the input boxes in the button to kind of make them the same width and give it some, you know, more padding inside here to make it look nicer. So at that point, everything is styled. There's some more functionality I want to kind of show you. So when I type and a new message comes in, notice that we're kind of stuck here in the scroll bar. So one thing I want to do is we want to actually force the page to scroll down when a new message comes in. So you can achieve that by using another ref in view. So let's go ahead up here and I'll say const messages ref is equal to ref of null. And on the actual messages component, I'm going to use that messages ref. So if I go down to messages, I can actually say ref is equal to messages ref. And that'll give us basically a variable we can call to change the DOM at a lower level if we wanted to. So the reason we're doing that is we actually want to, every time we append a message, we want to change the scroll height of this. So I'm going to say message ref.value scroll top is equal to message ref.value.scroll height. All right, so let's go ahead and save that and show what happens. So as I type in messages, Notice that it does scroll down to the bottom, but there is a little issue. There's a little bit of extra space of the scroll bar here, and I have to scroll down a little bit more just to see that final message. So I want to show you one thing that's kind of more advanced. So when you push stuff into the array, Vue is going to take a second to actually like render that to the DOM. So you need to wait to actually calculate the scroll top and scroll height. So what we could do is using that next tick function that we brought in, I'm going to go ahead and call it here. I'm going to say wait next tick, and I'm going to save that. And now as I type, it's going to basically append the message. It's going to wait for the page to render once, and then it's going to display the scroll height. And there you have it. That's how you can build a live chat room using Vue 3 Composition API with the Agora IO API as well. So if you enjoyed watching this tutorial, give me a thumbs up, leave a like, leave a subscription if you're new to this channel. Also leave a comment below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. All right, have a good day and happy coding.